So another incredibly important consideration when setting up for an interview is your audio equipment. Now, in most interviews, you're going to have multiple sources of audio. And in this situation, we've got multiple cameras. We've got two main cameras recording two different angles. And then we've got a lav on Alan here. And then also over him, we've got a boom mic. So in post, you're going to want to be able to sync all of this stuff up using the synchronize function in Premiere. We're going to show you that in a later lesson. But for now, you want to make sure that you have this equipment properly set up. So let's start with the microphones on the camera. You want to make sure that they're decent shotgun microphones, that they are pointed at the subject, and that the levels are proper. And you're shooting for something like at least -12 if you can get that. But those are not going to be your primary microphones. They're just there for synchronization purposes. All you need is a decent audio level, and then Premiere can figure out how to sync those cameras up with your other offboard audio later. So considering the remote audio that actually is going to a separate piece of equipment, and in this interview I'm using a Zoom H6. It has 4 primary XLR inputs and then the ability to add a couple more, hence the name 6 in the H6. In this situation, we're using 3 of the inputs because 2 are our lav mics that we're recording this tutorial with, and then the third is the boom mic. It is important that you have proper level on all of these devices, okay? So, usually in an interview situation, you want to have a primary and backup source of audio. In this situation, we've got a lav mic on Alan here, and then we've got the boom mic overhead. I usually like to go with this setup as opposed to using 2 booms or a backup lav or something like that, because it gives you more flexibility. In this situation, let's say Alan gets super passionate about something that he's saying.
Never happens.
And he taps his chest or smacks the lav microphone by accident because he's talking about something that affects him and really touches his heart or something like that. People do this all the time without realizing it. Professional people that are aware of that lav do it all the time without realizing it. So if you have a boom mic, you can cut away from that primary lav source, use the boom as a backup, and avoid that hit noise. Sometimes you may even prefer the sound of the boom over the lav. Sometimes you might get rustling of the clothing with the lav. There might be, it might not have as good a wind protection, and you might have some low rumble generated by wind if you're outside.
The person's hair might be brushing over it.
That can happen. Pieces of jewelry can hit it, all kinds of things. So having a completely separate, not connected to the person's source of audio with that boom really gives you incredible flexibility. So you want to make sure, number one, that you have camera audio and that it's at a really good level. You want to have 2 sources of offboard audio, usually a boom and a lav, and that those levels are set properly. And again, you're looking for at least -12. You don't want to go really too close to 0 because you take a real risk of peaking at that point. So I usually like to tell my students to stick around -12. If it goes a little over, a little under, that's okay, but that's kind of your target.
So now we've talked about the types of audio devices that we have on set for an interview. Let's talk about their proper placement. And let's start by talking about the boom microphone and where it should be placed.
So primarily what you're looking for in this situation is proximity to your subject's mouth, okay? You want to make sure that the mic is as close as it can possibly be to your subject's mouth and pointed directly at it without entering the frame of your shot. And when that happens, oh boy, it'll ruin everything. So you want to make sure that it is comfortably out of frame, but as close to the subject's mouth as you can possibly get it. And you're talking about distance from the subject's head and then also the angle at which the boom is placed. If you have the boom just placed straight down, headed towards their feet, you're not going to get as good a pickup on their voice as if you've got it angled exactly at the mouth.
And an overhead boom isn't your only option. You can also go under. And so if the headroom of your shot requires a lot of distance, or if it's a really wide shot, you can always come low and point it up toward their mouths as well.
Another consideration when you're thinking about going over or under with your boom is the situation that you're in. Do you have AC ducts that are in the ceiling? If you go with a low boom placement, focus towards the ceiling in the room going, you're gonna get the subject's mouth, but also everything above their head. If you have an AC duct up there, you're gonna hear that hum through the entire interview. Another consideration with low placement, if you're outside, is planes that may fly by. If you have that, again, low placement, plane flies over in relative proximity to the subject, it's gonna ruin whatever soundbite they're giving you at that point. So in those situations, you probably wanna go over the subject rather than under.
So let's move on to talk about our lavalier or lav microphone. Now this is the microphone that is on the subject themselves. And this is something that you should allow them to do themselves. And this is for several reasons. This is usually the first thing that I do when they appear on set, mostly so I don't forget. I bring them the lavalier clip with the cable going to the pack, and I ask them in a very nice, non-awkward way to go ahead and run this up whatever clothing they have on. Now, you let them do that for several reasons. One, it's just gonna be more comfortable for them anyway. Two, they don't know who you are. And so you have to be in relative close proximity to people as you're miking them up, and that can be really uncomfortable for both parties. So it's inevitable though, that since they're not professional video producers, they don't know what to do when it comes out the other end. So it's not uncommon for them to turn around. At that point in time, you figure out something else to do so you're not just staring at them trying to mic themselves up. And they're gonna end up with this mic coming out of their shirt, kind of like this. They're gonna end up with this microphone coming out of their shirt awkwardly. And they're gonna call you back and they're gonna say, okay, here you go. Or they're gonna try to clip it on themselves in some terrible manner. And so you now will be called back over and you will have to very genuinely and with much talking them through the process, get that microphone where you want it to be. So I tend to walk them through each step. Okay, great, that looks good. I'm gonna go ahead and place it here. Is that okay, for example? And they'll almost always say, yeah, they'll lift their head, and you get that microphone exactly where you want it to be. Take your time in doing this, but work efficiently as to not make this a super awkward encounter.
Definitely. Yeah, you wanna give off an air of confidence and professionalism when you're basically touching this other person. You've asked their permission, you've told them what you're going to do, now you just need to execute it quickly and make sure that you get the mic exactly where you want it the first time instead of having to reapproach them later and go through that whole awkward situation again.
Now, a quick tip when getting the lavalier actually set up. It's good practice to not just have the cable run straight down from the clip itself, because if they were to step on this or something else, it's gonna pull straight through their shirt. Mm-hmm. You wanna create a loop in the microphone. And to do this, we loop it up and through. And so that way now when it gets pulled, clip it there. So now when it gets pulled, it doesn't pull the whole thing out.
It'll actually keep the mic in relative position to where you put it at the beginning. And you'll be surprised when people get nervous, their hands start to move, and they'll inevitably touch that cable and pull on it. So you want to make sure that you've got it set up so that the mic doesn't disappear on you.
Your sternum is the natural resonating center of your body. And so the reason why you see most lavaliers put generally around the sternum is for that reason. You're gonna get the most depth and tone from their voice. And there are dozens of good tutorials online that teach you cool ways to rig up a lav to where it can't be seen. Obviously, I'm wearing a collared button-up shirt. It's one of the easiest types of shirts to lav. What happens if they're wearing like a skin-tight dress? What happens if they're wearing multiple layers of clothing? These are things that you just kind of have to figure out. You should always try to hide the microphone as much as possible, and in some instances that's just not fully possible. But I've also seen some folks try to run it up through their collar if they're wearing a tie. So be experimental, but the goal is to always get the best quality possible.
Absolutely, and you want a high quality representation of that person's voice because you're listening to potentially very personal, very important things that they're saying. So you want to have the highest quality tone and depth associated with that so you get a real idea of what that person really sounds like.
Lavaliers come in both wired and wireless models. The wireless models tend to be more expensive, usually to a significant margin. I wouldn't say one is better or worse, they both have their ups and downs. I personally love to use wired microphones because there's zero chance at interference. You like wireless, don't you?
Yeah, I'm a big wireless fan because I like the convenience of being able to place the receiver that receives the signal from the transmitter that's on the person in anywhere, any place that I want. I enjoy that flexibility. Yes, you do run the risk of interference from cell phones and radio equipment and things like that, but it's relatively rare.
So consider those as you guys are looking to price different lavaliers.
So when you're thinking about the audio setup for your interview, remember you have several separate components to consider. The microphones on your cameras, the separate from your subject microphone, usually a boom placed above or below, and then the lav mic that's placed on your subject themselves. You want to make sure that all of those have decent level and that they have separate inputs so that audio is independent of each other. You do that and you're going to have a lot more flexibility in post later, and you're going to get the highest quality audio possible.
Which is important because people are going to be listening to this person talk for the bulk, well, for the entire video that you're making. If the audio is subpar, your audience is not going to engage with that subject. So focus on your audio, get the best audio possible, and your interview is going to be well received.